Let's talk about importing data into CAS. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we are in a new CAS file that has 0 records and 0 fields. When working in CAS, most of the features accessible are going to be found in this tree view on the left. Go down to Reports and Programs, right-click, and select New Folder to create a new folder in which you'd like to store your import layout. I'm going to rename this folder CAS Import. Within that folder, go to the CAS desktop and right-click and select New Object Import. In general, as a rule of thumb, whenever in doubt in CAS or whenever you're trying to find something, a layout, or you're trying to create a report or import, if you right-click, you're likely to get some options. In this case, in order to modify the contents of this folder, you right-click and go to Properties. And by selecting Properties, you'll be able to define where you're going to get your data from and what type of file you're importing from. Click on the Browse button, and I'm going to find the file I'd like to bring in. Here I'm going to bring in a file called importexample.xls. Select the file type as Excel, and if I click on the View Import File button here, CAS is going to fire up an Excel session, and it's going to show me what we have in the file. So if I scroll up a little bit, I can see that my data is starting in row 1. I should say my field names are starting in row 1, my data is starting in row 2. And this is what we want to have when we're going to import data. We want to make sure that field names row is in row 1, data starts in row 2, and that the active sheet is the one that contains the data, which in this case it is. It's in this tab right here. So I don't need to make any changes here. At this point I can just say don't save, and I can go back to the layout. Before I click the Run button, I may want to, however, change the incoming field names to match some standard set of names that I'd like to use within CAS. And I can do that field name mapping by going to the Layout tab and selecting Tools, Get Layout. And when you do that, CAS reads in the first record, the incoming name, incoming type, and then we get a copy of incoming name and type down these columns here, CAS name and CAS type. And it's in the CAS name column that we can change the incoming field name to match whatever field name is that we'd like to use within the CAS file itself. Clicking on a drop-down list here, we have access to a CAS data reference, which you may have set up. If you're starting from scratch, this drop-down list will not be populated, and there will be another tutorial on how to create a data reference. If you have it, you can utilize it. If not, just go down and type in the field names that you'd like to use within your CAS session. Again, as I said, if you have a data reference populated, the autocomplete will display the field names listed in that autocomplete. And I'm just going to map the field names I think I'm going to use. If you don't map a field name, CAS is just going to make the incoming field name uppercase and separate the spaces in the name with an underscore. Okay. Once you are satisfied with the field names that you're going to be using within CAS, you can just click the Run button here, and CAS will read in your data, in this case from the Excel file. Here we have 1,800 records and 52 fields imported. This is a relatively small file. It's important to note that CAS is RAM intensive, so the more RAM you have allocated to CAS, the more data you can work with. When I click OK, the CAS Field Wizard pops up on the screen, and the Field Wizard lets you step through and inspect the values in each column and just make sure that each field has the appropriate data type and format. So for instance here, under zip code, I can see that while my field came in as text, that's fine. It appears that in Excel the zip code was not formatted with a leading 0. So there's a special function that you can use within CAS to do this formatting for you. To access a complete list of functions and fields in this current CAS session, you can click on the Expression Builder button, and the list of functions is displayed in this middle column here. The function I want to use to do the zip code conversion is just called make zip. So I'm just going to take a look at the syntax here and then populate it in this text box above. So let's put in make zip space zip, and when I click the test button here, I can see what my conversion will look like after applying this calculation. So here we've just right justified the column, made sure that the field was 5 characters wide, and then padded it with a leading 0. Click OK, click Next. Here with occupancy status, this is a field we may want to change incoming values to match some standard set of values you'd like to store within CAS. So we'll click the Map button, and we'll get this little screen that pops up here that shows you the current values and allows you to change the current values to whatever code you'd like to use. So I'm going to change this to I, P, and S. You'll notice that there is a standard set of codes listed here. This corresponds to field codes in CAS, and if you're starting from scratch, you may not have this information, and we can talk about that in another tutorial. So for now, you can just change them to whatever you want them to be, regardless of whether or not standard codes are defined. Click OK, hit Next. I'm going to do the same thing for loan purpose. I'm going to click the Map button, change these incoming values. Click OK. Here for these date fields, I'm just going to check the incoming data type. So here the first payment date is currently a number, but it should be date, so I'm going to go ahead and click the Convert to Date button. CAS is going to try to pick from this drop-down list the format that corresponds to the incoming data. So here CAS picks month, day, year. Clicking Convert, you can see what the data looks like after the conversion. CAS displays how many valid dates and how many invalid dates there are. These invalid dates could be 0, or they could be dates that have 35 days in a month, 13 months in the year, something like that. What we're just looking for here is just to make sure that the overall conversion is correct, and the invalid dates can be identified in an edit set later. So click OK. Same thing for maturity date. These are currently numbers. I'm going to go ahead and convert this to date. And when you get to the end of the wizard, after you perform all the conversions you want to perform, you can go ahead and click the Finish button here. CAS is now read the data in completely into CAS, and it has done all the conversions and mapping instructions. And if we take a look at the properties of the import layout we've used, the calculations you've done on the data are stored along with the code mappings as well. And as said earlier, when CAS reads data in, it reads it into memory, so we haven't actually saved anything to the disk yet. So you're going to want to go to the File menu and select Save or Save As to write your changes to the disk.